Okay, now we're going to try and illustrate two categorical variables using bar charts. I can use, again, the data in this form from C1 to C5, or I can use the data here in C11 to C13. So let's see how this works now. We go to graph, we want a bar chart. Our data are in a table, so we pick that first of all. And we have two variables to illustrate, survival status and class. So I want a two-way table. And let's try it both ways. First of all, I'm going to try it using the stacked form. I say OK to this. It wants to know where are my data. Well, all right, I can use either one of these forms. So I don't know, let's try the data here in 11 to 13. So it's looking for variables. Variables are numbers. The numbers are in the columns I called alive and dead, C12 and C13. And those data are arranged in terms of class, which is C11. Okay, now it says here table arrangement. Which of these you pick will determine how the plot is going to look. So I'm just going to let Minitab do its default thing. It's putting columns on the outermost. Now what's in columns? A columns is alive or dead. And what's in rows is class. Alright, so columns are alive and dead. That should be on the outside. And unless I say otherwise, Minitab is going to illustrate my data using counts. Let's say OK. Alright, so here I have it. And this plot here is illustrating the data over here, right here. And here are my alive people. There were much fewer people who survived than people who perished in the sinking of the Titanic. And each color here gives me an indication of the number of people in each one of these classes. And if you mouse over, it will show you what the value is. Okay, this plot is showing me in terms of alive or dead, and it's done in terms of count. Now if I shrink this down and do this baby again, but this time instead of putting alive and dead on the outside, I could put class on the outside. Class is in rows, rows are outermost. Say OK to this. And now here's my plot. And this time I've got 4 bars that are done in terms of survival status, as opposed to the other graph where we had 2 bars that were done in terms of class. Which one you want to use really depends on how you want to discuss your data. Alright, and we could also have the y-axis done as a percent. But to illustrate that, I'm going to go, and instead of using these segmented bar charts, I'm going to use what are sometimes referred to as the side-by-side. Okay, now hang on. I got to get out of this. Cancel that. I got to go back in here again. Graph, bar chart. Values from a table. I want 2A, but I'm going to use cluster. Sorry, I called it a side-by-side bar chart, but sometimes it's referred to as a cluster as well. Okay, now the window that opens up looks very similar. This time, again, I've got my graph variables, and I've got, what have I got? I've got alive and dead, and my row variable is class. And alive and dead is going to be on the outside. Okay, say OK. And now here's what we get. And this is done in terms of a count. By the way, I don't know if I've showed you guys this yet, but if you double click on any one of these titles, you can go in and you can change what these axes say. Alright, so that's done as a count. And I've got a group of bars for all the people who survived and a group of bars, for all the people who died. Many times when you're generating these kinds of plots where you've got 2 different categories, usually we want to use different colors for the bars. And for example, usually where I've got my data here in 2B, big broad categories of those who survived and those who died, I may want to compare the first-class passengers who survived to the first-class passengers who died, which means really I want the same color for first class, but then maybe I want a different color for second class and another color for third, etc. If you click in any one of the burrs, or by the way, you can do a double click on your mouse, then do a right click, you can say edit burrs, and we want to assign groups. And in this case, I want the burrs to be colored according to the 4 different classes. So if I say select here, say OK, then Minitab colors them according to class. Now you can play around with this a fair bit. Alright, here's my plot. It's done as count. And what's important to see here is that the survival status is on the outside, class is on the inside. Now let's suppose we want to generate that same plot, but rather than having it as counts, I want to do it as percent. Now here's where things get interesting, because when you use percents, there are 3 different ways Minitab will calculate the percents. As we saw with contingency tables, you can take the percent across, right here, across all categories. Now we know that there were 2,201 people aboard the Titanic. What the program will do if I say this is it will take each of the counts and divide every number by 2201. If I say within category at level 1, which is the outermost category, it basically is going to calculate for us the conditional percentages, and it will illustrate the graph using the conditional percentages. So let's start off slow here. Let's go go across all categories. So what the program is, when I get the graph is basically going to show me the joint distribution. So if I say OK to this and OK again, here's my plot, but this time my y-axis does not really show me data. What my y-axis really shows me here is percent. So I can change that. Alright, and again I've got a block of burrs for alive and a block of block of burrs for those who died. And again, if you like, you can click on one of your burrs, edit them, and I may want to do the color according to the classes. Now, there's something to note here. It says right here that the percent is calculated within all data. That means that in order to add up to 100%, I have to add the roughly 9% of this burr, and I don't know, the 5% on this one, and the 7% here, and the roughly 10% here, plus all the percentages of these burrs. So to get 100%, I got to add up all of these burrs together. So this plot really illustrates for me the joint distribution. So if I looked at this burr right here, for example, just this green one, what can I say? I can say that roughly 30% of everybody who was aboard the Titanic was a crew member and they died. Okay, now, so that's the total. Shrink that down again, bring up my last dialog box, and leaving this thing turned on, going back into chart options, I can now specify that I want to do what your textbook and your notes call the conditional percentages. So that's within the outermost category. If I say OK to this, now my plot looks fairly different. Again, this y-axis is in terms of percent. If I could spell it right, we would all be fine. Okay, a block for alive, a block for dead. And again, right click, edit your burrs, group them according to class. Okay. Now, this time if you look, I've got roughly, 28% right here. I've got another 16 or 17% here, plus about 25, plus about 30. When I add these burrs together, this totals 100%. So what this plot is showing me, this set of burrs represents only the people who survived, and then what percentage were in each class. This set of burrs over here, again, if I add up all the percentages, will give me 100%, but they only illustrate the people who perished aboard the Titanic. All right, so I could be satisfied having my plot look like this, or if I shrink this down, let's play with this a little bit more. I could say, well, rather than having columns being outermost, what happens if I want rows to be outermost? How does that change the water on the beans? And here's my plot, and this time class is on the outside and survival status is on the inside. And again, highlighting one of these burrs, editing. This time I'm probably going to want to color the burrs in terms of who survived and who died. So C11 done in terms of class. Let's just say I did this, okay? Say select, yeah, okay. Well, that's not all that interesting. Really what I want is one color for the alive and one color for the dead people. So edit my burrs, go to groups, get rid of this. This time I'm going to assign my attributes by graph variables. The graph variables are my numbers. And the way I picked my numbers, it was the alive and the dead that were the numbers. Say OK to this, and now I get the plot really that I'm interested in. And again, this says data, but really should say percent. And Minitab kindly tells me down here that the percent is calculated within levels of class. So when I add up these two burrs, they will total 100%. These are 100% of all the first class passengers, 100% the second, the third, and the crew. All right, so there's a lot to chew on here when it comes to bar graphs. I suggest you take these data yourself and play around with it a little bit and see what you can get the program to produce for you.